Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Hannah Yellen, and I'm a reader in media and culture, and I'm the chair of the Creative Industries Research and Innovation Network. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this afternoon's talk, organised as part of the fifth International Creative Industries Festival. The talk's delivered by the artist James Irwin and entitled Synthetic Realities Across Contemporary Sound and Image, Artificial Intelligence and the Digital as Collaborative Practice. But before I tell you more about James and this talk, there's a little bit of housekeeping. The talk will be for around about maybe 35 minutes, and then after that we'll have time for questions. My colleagues are going to put feedback forms in the chat, and it is ever so helpful to the festival organising team if you can fill those out. And the programme for the rest of the festival will also go in the chat in a link, and it's running till Thursday. There's another event this afternoon at 3:30, and then Tuesday to Thursday it's all in person on campus. So whether you're in Oxfordshire or not, hopefully you'll be able to come to some more events in the festival. Also, there's a link to sign up to our newsletter to find out about future events. And we have a brand new Instagram profile at Creative Industries Fest, and we'd be really grateful if you followed us there. Now, about today's speaker. James Irwin is an artist and a researcher at Kingston School of Art, an associate lecturer at University of the Arts London, and a digital media tutor at the Royal Academy. He works with web technologies, AI systems, and digital sound and image to investigate the notion of a vital life force inherent within digital media. He's had solo exhibitions at Gossamer Fog and the Space in Between Galleries in London, and group exhibitions at Anonymous Gallery in New York, Anna Kulti's Gallery, I don't know if I said that right, in London, Datelglert, I should have asked you this, James, before we started, if that's how you say that, in London, and Space in Between Gallery in London. He has many, many web projects as well, including last year's evolution towards a digital composting with the Blackbird Super Rare Space. His work expresses a concern with closeted forms of subjectivity that start and end with the human body. In response, he reproduces recombinant bodies from digital hardware, software, and human wetware. All of these terms, I hope you'll tell us what they actually mean, James. So collectively through the computer screen and speakers as the audiovisual output of live code, often manipulated by user interaction. So please, everybody, join me in welcoming James Irwin. And James, I will now hand over to you to share your talk.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah, and thanks for inviting me to talk today. It's great to be able to share my work in this way. Normally when I do these things, it's for art schools and art students, so it's good to reach out to like a broader audience. Yeah, so the talk's going to be entitled Synthetic Realities Across Temporary Sound and Image, but I've not always worked digitally, so I'm going to sort of trace the journey that I've taken through the last 20 years working as an artist. So I started making sculpture, did a BA at Newcastle University, graduated in 2005. And there I was making sculptural objects that kind of probably mainly were concerned with like minimal aesthetics, like this allure of objects made by people like Donald Trump, who made these really nice looking minimal art objects. But my work has always been interested in systems, really. So it's sort of starting from the object, but also incorporating the information around the object. So when I did an MA at Goldsmiths as well, finishing when I graduated in 2010. And there I learned how to code and how to make environments that would sense the space that you were in and feed back into like physical computing systems like that would speak to you in some way. But finishing Goldsmiths, I was kind of aware that these network technologies weren't actually being used in the gallery spaces so much. So I had a show in 2011 at Space in Between that sort of responded to this lack of networked activity within the gallery. So these are anti-digital objects, like this one you can see on the screen now, which is called 343,000 cubic centimeters of isolated space, was an object, like a minimal art object, covered in Wi-Fi absorbent material, or radar absorbent material, sorry, which would create a Wi-Fi void inside the cube, that kind of spoke to this lack of technologies at the time which were being used widely outside of the gallery, inside the gallery. So this is another object that I made, called the Hopeless Diamond. There was a model of the first stealth fighter plane designed at Skunk Works in America. It's called the Hopeless Diamond because I didn't know how to get it off the ground, but it was completely invisible to radar. So my version is covered in Wi-Fi blocking paint and again creates this like Wi-Fi void inside the gallery. I suppose this interest in minimalism is relevant to the work because of like writing by someone called Michael Fried, this essay he wrote called Art and Objecthood at the time, which was critical of minimalism because he saw it as being theatrical in that it made sculpture understandable from one dimension using Gestalt psychology, so that you could understand what an object would look like from one point of view, hence it being theatrical. And I suppose that this idea of the object being completed in the mind, and therefore the viewer have an active role in the making of the artwork, how the artwork's produced in the mind of the viewer, was something that I sort of took from that. This is another image of that work in that show. And then a big change in my practice happened around 2013 when I was preparing for a solo exhibition at Space in Between, where I was writing code in a programming environment called processing, exploring digital color space, where I was making these little patterned images that would go through nearly all of the digital colors, nearly 17 million digital colors within these images. And when I was looking online, I was going to show these images as prints in the show, but I was researching online about a month before the show and discovered that, to my alarm at the time, that there was another artist based in Paris called France Lagarande, who'd made very similar work a few years beforehand. So I was like initially it's kind of like it would obviously be awful to be showing the same work as someone else without acknowledging them. So I was freaking out. And then I decided that it was actually going to be a really good opportunity to explore this overlap between our practices, and perhaps like the way that authorship and agency is broken down and can collapse through digital objects and images. So I invited France to come along to the show with her work and made two other pieces of work. So this is on the screen now. You can see France's work, the bigger image on the left-hand side, together with some of my prints. And then I made two pieces of work that responded to this overlap in our practices. One of them, you can see on the screen on the right-hand side, was like a Mobius strip, this like impossible geometric shape that I mapped, where I mapped the images that France and I had made onto this form that rotated as a metaphor in the gallery space to speak about this overlap between our practices. And then this was also like the first time that I'd used sound in an exhibition, because what I did was I took every pixel that France and mine images shared, projected them pixel by pixel onto this little sculptural object in the corner, and then translated that numerical value of the pixels into sound, into a sine wave that reverberated through the space and sort of spoke about this overlap in our practices. So I think this was like a big turning point for me because it made me realize how the digital works in a way that can completely collapse the idea of authorship existing within the individual. And so it was became this shared process that I was kind of keen to explore. After that, I started working more collaboratively with other people. I was working with Space in Between at the time. And they were working with someone else, an artist called Leela Fowler, who they recognized as having similar interests to my own. I went to visit Leela in her studio, and she had these like little geodes, these little rocks within rocks. So they became like a container for the objects and things that we made within the exhibition, which is called How the Mind Comes to Be Furnished in 2016. This is like an animation of the geode, but when I play the sound in a minute, what we did was Leela had been to America and she had these like sound recordings of wind turbines crashing through the air, and we wrote a program that hacked into the gallery Wi-Fi. So when people entered the gallery space and used their mobile phones, this program would recognize that Wi-Fi activity and then play sound of these wind turbines crashing through the air within the gallery space. So I'll play this now. So within that last sound clip, when people use their phones in the gallery, if there was more people using the phones, the sound would be more intense. This image is from a show that I did at Gossamer Fog in 2018. It's kind of one of the last times I've really shown in a physical gallery space. Everything since then is I've moved online, and most of the exhibitions that I have nowadays are online, basically. Yeah. So I suppose this is one of the most personal things that I've done as well, because in response to this idea of anxiety. So I've always kind of had anxiety in the background, so like dealing with that. And this show, Listening to Xanax, in 2018, responded to this idea by placing these little Wi-Fi connected robots on these tables, and they were covered in these 3D printed objects that were chromed. So they were 3D printed to sort of represent the top of your head, and then they were chromed to reflect the gallery space around them, and they would move to the edge of the table in these precarious ways. And then when one of the robots would get to the edge of the table, it would communicate with the other robot to do the same. But then sometimes, because I'd forgotten to program into the artwork what would happen if they ran out of batteries, sometimes, because when they did run out of batteries, they'd end up falling off the tables. And they were connected to a sound of my breathing, so that when they moved, the space would reverberate with the sound of my breathing as well. In the backspace of that gallery, there was a 2-channel video work called In Through the Nose, Out Through the Mouth. And that was made by taking a short audio sample from one of those mindfulness meditation apps of this guy repeating the phrase in through the nose, out through the mouth, to try and get you to calm down. And what I did was took that little audio sample, played it through a piece of sound editing software called Ableton Live at different pitches, and then Google Docs, speech to text translation, transcription software would take those audio, those like various pitched audio recordings and transcribe those into what it understood the sound to be saying. And that looked like this. This was a an exhibition that an online exhibition that I was invited to curate by a online project space called Scalf that was run by an artist called Claire Rundy. It happened around the time of the COVID pandemic, when lots of bricks and mortar gallery spaces were closing down and opening like viewing rooms online. And I kind of saw it as an opportunity to do something more interesting with. I saw it as like a sort of critical response to how these galleries were translating their activities to online spaces, which were quite bland and sort of served the purposes of the market rather than the purposes of making digital art interesting and doing different things with what you could do with a medium. So I invited 8 artists to contribute to the show, and they all sent me like video work or sound work. And I arranged it in a three-dimensional space within the browser and hijacked the webcam so that the image of the viewer as you used it was placed in the middle of the show that you were watching, sort of chroma keyed out in this crude way that you can see here. This was called You're in a Computer Game, Max. Okay, so this is the start of what I've been doing for the last 6 years, which my practice has become, or the vehicle for my practice has become this part-time practice-based PhD that I'm doing in Kingston. And the working title is When Code Becomes Image, Tapping the Digital Black Box for Science of Life. It's kind of the work responds to a frustration I had with making digital images that appeared to me to be flat and lifeless, but because they were making me feel a lack of emotion, I sort of recognized that there must be a space within digital images because of that I could explore a way of getting them to make me feel things. So yeah, the rest of the work that I'm going to show you is about trying to navigate this way through the digital aesthetics, basically, as a way of trying to create affective responses within the body. So there's a video that I'll play now which describes it's taken from a longer video that translates some of my writing into or through the voice of an AI model, text-to-speech model, cloned on that of the media theorist Catherine Hales. So she's talking through my writing on top of some of the images that I was making at the time, or that I've made throughout the project, that I've been sort of responding to as a way of trying to create this sense of feeling within the digital. And the video, the bit that I'm going to show you, describes the sort of process and contextualizes some of the ideas around the process that I've been through. It's about 6.5 minutes long, so I'll play this now.
Taking this as a cue, I have used high-level programming languages such as JavaScript and Python to interface with the black box throughout this project, using JavaScript libraries such as 3JS to render graphics in real time from code in the web browser. I've also used generative systems such as fine-tuned large language models and text-to-image technologies that use code to call upon APIs and build stacks of modular AI packages. These broader ontologies of networked modular stacks form what N. Catherine Hales has described in Unthought, the power of the cognitive non-conscious as cognitive assemblages. The systems have been put together with the intention of broadening the scope of the flat image space that I was frustrated by, of speaking through a digital language that is not intentionally black boxed by software designers. In doing so, I have found that working with code doesn't unveil the inner mysteries of the computer. The magic of the computer remains as mysterious as ever when translating my high-level intentions into commands. Code does give me greater control over computational systems, though. As a programmer, or hacker, as Stevenson refers to coders in his 1999 essay, I am, however, able to dive deeper into the stack of the cognitive assemblage. Code lets me tie different modules together into different combinations of functionality that produce variations of surface effects. Working in this way, I can generate spluttering audio output or flickering digital images that somehow register as embodied signals in meat space that are lively, uncanny, weird, eerie, or haunted. It is by experimenting with tying modules of the stack together in different combinations, and by sifting through their combined surface effects, using my body as a filter through which I register signs of silicon-based life, that I am able to grab onto tendrils and follow pathways that resonate with some innate understanding of vitality. It is within the folds and seams of these cognitive assemblages that I search for signs of silicon-based life. Whilst looking for the human within the digital, I have been working through the different ontological layers of digital image and sound production in search of a vital life force within the machine that somehow resonates with the idea of being human. I trust my body, responding to embodied feelings, to technological effects whilst augmenting technology with bodily traits such as lifelike movements, sounds, and the potential for creativity. I started the project 6 years ago, testing how digital cameras reproduce materiality as an index of reality in meat space. This early work extends the history of malleable reality in pre-digital photography. In Don't Hate the Index, Reconsidering the Promise of Purse, Chris Belden Adams states, before the digital age, photography's conditional relationship to the real was reiterated with techniques such as lateral reversals, montage, and collage, multiple exposures, retouching, hand painting, and composite image-making practices. I began making images in the studio, mimicking how layers work in digital image software by layering different sheets of plastics and fabrics in the space between the camera's lens and images displayed on the screen. Seen through the eye of the digital camera, the tactile materials would add, multiply, screen, and color the digital images they affected. Since layers were introduced by Thomas Knoll in Photoshop 3.0 in 1995, the machine's capacity to store, sample, and flatten images into synthetic semiotic assemblages has augmented the two-dimensional digital picture plane to such an extent that the digital image now functions as an index of artificiality. Working on a hunch that the human can be located within the artificial, I trod a path of working inwards towards the machine, stepping ontologically closer to machine code. This involved working with custom shaders in Unity and 3JS that punctured the onboard digital image by rupturing it with crude chroma keying effects. These effects were applied in real time in a way that superimposed the artificiality of the digital image back onto itself through code. Throughout the project, I have embraced a synthetic language that works according to the semiotics of the machine. My hunch is that life can be located within the digital, in cognitive assemblages that combine dispersed and fractured technological agents and authors. The images and sounds point to the potential for new forms of life that exist outside of the human body, whilst, for now at least, being steered and controlled by it. Through the artworks that I am about to show, my hope is that vitalist aesthetics carve out a space through which silicon-based life can be better imagined.
Okay, so this is a diagram describing the methodology that I've used throughout the process, that was described in the video. So I've moved from using digital cameras closer towards moving closer towards the machine, using code and combining different and AI in different ways, combining these things together in a way that becomes more artificial, but then weirdly or perhaps counterintuitively, it's through doing that I was able to create a sense of feeling, or develop ways of using digital effects to feel more. These images sort of describe the process that was described by Catherine Hales within the video that you just watched. So this is a sort of journey through that process that I've taken. Eventually, so I started with photography, and then throughout the process, I've gradually let that go and embrace the sort of synthetic, artificial language of digital sounds and images. These were like screenshots of apps that I made on my that I took screenshots of on my phone. And there's these kinds of images, these sort of like really glossy images that I was rendering in a piece of 3D modeling software called Blender, where the digital image space itself would reflect itself, that I was sort of finding that they spoke to me in a certain way, or these sort of shiny images sort of spoke to me. The research has been split into like three different sections called simulation, emulation, and reenactment, which these three terms were used by early AI researchers in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as a way of modeling artificial intelligence at the time. The simulation section is made up of these 3D rendered animations in Blender where I'd use cloth physics. I'd create these, I call them worms, and they would use physics engines in Blender to create these like lifelike movements. I suppose what's interesting to me in this is the fact that I'm handing a lot of the decision making to the machine, so that instead of keyframing the animations frame by frame, like determining the movement of the animation frame by frame myself, I sort of offset that decision making process to the machine through these physics simulations, and what I end up with is something that I wouldn't be able to necessarily make myself. This is another one of those worms. So the idea of them is for them to make you feel a bit weird by simulating lifelike movement. And then this is another one that I made in a piece of software called Houdini, which is like a simulation engine. And I was trying to explore the idea of growth. So if these things are going to be alive, they need to grow in some way. And then within the emulation section, I fine-tuned an AI LoRa model using a text-to-image AI system which is open source, called Stable Diffusion. There's these things called LoRa models, which you can take a very small data set. So this is only like 30 images that I used to train this model on. It's kind of like 30 images that I kind of was working with in Blender, making renders of in Blender that would speak back to me in some way. Generally, they're really glossy and shiny and reflective of digital image space. And then I would take these 30 images and then make text-based translations of them. So from my own point of view. So this image on the left I described as a Blender render close-up image of a white, black, and blue patterned colored insect-like thing with lots of what could be legs or limbs in a big pile or mess. The surface of the object, its material, is shiny and reflective, almost glass-like digital texture. So the first part, these are all like, this kind of replicates what you would prompt an AI, if you're going to make an image in an AI system, AI text-to-image system, you'd write a text-based prompt. The first part of the text describes what the image is. So these are Blender renders made in a piece of 3D modeling software called Blender. The next section of the image, the big chunk in the middle, describes what I was seeing in the image. And then digital texture would be the image style, so that it classifies the image style, which in this case is digital texture. This is another one of those. And then, I think what this has enabled me to do is, because this is like the data set of text that I've uploaded with these 30 images to the model. And then to make new images from the model, I can cut up bits of this text, feed them back in, and create new images. And when I showed these to a friend, an artist called Maggie Roberts, she was quite, what she commented on was the tightness of the feedback loop between myself and the images that I was generating. I kind of see, which I kind of understand as, I think one of the issues with when we're using AI to generate images, lots of the process, so these things appear as if by magic. through these texts. So lots of the process is lost. And I think through this process, somehow, some of the process of making the images is maintained. So that's kind of what I'm kind of interested in, kind of whilst collaborating with software and AI systems, I'm interested in where my voice stops and ends, and having some control over what's happening with these images as a way of making them feel more human. So these are examples of the images that I've made with the LoRa model, and these can all run. Stable Diffusion is an open source AI text-to-image system that you can just run locally on your computer if your computer has a good enough graphics card. So you can download the model that the text-to-image system is trained on onto your computer locally, and use your system at home to generate AI images rather than being offset to the cloud. Okay, this is the last piece of work that I'm going to talk to you about today. It's a little bit complicated, so bear with me. But it's called Python glossolalia, and it emerged from, after reading Neil Stephenson's novel Snow Crash. Stevenson introduces this idea of the metaverse, which is this space that people can goggle into and enter a world parallel to physical reality in a virtual space. And within the novel, hackers or coders, or as Stevenson calls them, hackers, if they see images of noise, this boundary between the human body, this is what I was interested in, this boundary between the human body and the machine becomes breached as their bodies become infected with computer viruses, which ends up resulting in them speaking in tongues. So this idea of glossolalia, which is a meaningless form of speech which is full of intention. So because lots of what I do is about this divide between the human body and the digital, this was a way of me somehow finding a way between that space. So I thought, it got me thinking about how maybe I can sort of replicate or get an AI system to make a computer speak in tongues. So I got in touch with a language scientist that I found online called Paul DeLacy, and he had a big archive of glossolalic recordings that he made a long time ago. I spoke to Paul, and I was hoping to kind of get access to this data set of recordings to train an AI system to speak in tongues. But because when he made the recordings, he didn't get permission to share these recordings afterwards. I was unable to pursue that avenue. But he made me realize that within glossolalia, when people speak in tongues, which is performed like during religious sermon through to create this sense of rapture, or sometimes when people are under the influence of psychedelic drugs, they start speaking, people have reported speaking in tongues. But Paul made me realize that although it's meaningless, glossolalia follows the same structure as regular language. So it made me realize that I could take that, I could break regular language down into its component parts, combine those through a computer program, and get a computer to speak in tongues that way. So I wrote a script in Python, programming language called Python, that takes these two things at the top of the screen. You can see this list of graphemes and this list of sounds which are more commonly placed within glossolalic speech. The program combines these two elements together to create lists of text that it sends to an AI system, which is trained on my voice, to then in real time play back a computer speaking in tongues. So I made this and put it online, put put audio recordings online, and then someone saw it. And I did like I played at a noise night, which is completely outside of my comfort zone, somewhere in Hackney a couple of years ago. I just turned up with my laptop and hid behind it and made this computer speak in tongues. But this is what that sounds like. This is an audio recording of what that sounds like. And then this is another one of those worm animations, given voice. So given the voice of the Python glossolalia.
He's got a Wessen doen geschehen, ja. Silly quick looking, curly hoopalassing. John, she's absolutely. Should do it. Find my door. Alone is very speziell. Motor means
Okay, that's lots of my research is at the website surfacecollider.net as well, for those of you that are interested in looking for more. But yeah.